The screams echoed through the cell block. Metal clanked. A tray hit the floor. Then, silence. For a moment, it felt like the whole of Rikers Island had stopped breathing. Marcus pressed his face against the bars, eyes wide. Down the hallway, 3 inmates were standing over another man who lay on the ground, blood running from his forehead. The guards weren't moving. They just watched. One of them even turned away, pretending not to see what was happening. That's when Marcus realized the truth. The gangs, not the guards, ran Rikers Island. The biggest one, the Blood Hounds, controlled everything. The phones, the food, even who got to take a shower. If you weren't part of them, you either paid in cigarettes or protection money. If you refused, you ended up like the guy on the floor, bleeding, silent, and forgotten. But that day was different. The man they beat wasn't just anyone. He was one of the guards' informants. And everyone knew what that meant. Someone inside the jail had just declared war. The leader of the Blood Hounds, a man everyone called King Dre, looked up from the scene and locked eyes with Marcus. His stare was cold and heavy, like a warning. You saw nothing. Before Marcus could look away, King Dre smiled slowly and said, "Welcome to Rikers, kid. Now you know how it works." Marcus's heart raced. He had been inside Rikers for only 2 weeks, and already he understood why people said this place had its own laws. But what he didn't know was that he was about to get dragged right into the middle of a war that even the guards couldn't stop. That night, the lights flickered off early. The sound of whispers filled the darkness, plans, threats, secrets moving through the air. Something was coming. Something big. Then, in the silence of the night, someone screamed again. Just 2 weeks earlier, Marcus was standing in a courtroom, hands cuffed, thinking it was all a mistake. He wasn't supposed to end up in a place like this. He had been caught driving a stolen car, something he swore he didn't do, but the cops said he matched the description. The judge gave him 90 days on Rikers Island. Just 3 months, Marcus thought. I'll be fine. But nothing could prepare him for what was waiting behind those gates. The first thing that hit him was the smell, sweat, metal, and fear. The walls were covered in scratches, and the noise never stopped, people yelling, banging, arguing. The guards didn't look like protectors. They looked tired, angry, and ready to look away if trouble started. The first inmate to talk to him was a tall guy named Rico. "Stay quiet, mind your business, and don't owe nobody nothing," Rico said, giving Marcus a sharp look. "You survive that way." But Marcus didn't understand what that meant until his second night. 2 inmates fought over a blanket, and the one who lost didn't wake up the next morning. Everyone acted like nothing happened. Now, standing in the darkness weeks later, Marcus knew what survival really meant here. It wasn't about staying strong. It was about staying invisible. But that night, as footsteps echoed down the hall and King Dre's men moved quietly from cell to cell, Marcus realized he was no longer invisible. Someone whispered his name. And then the lock on his cell clicked open. The cell door creaked open, slow and heavy, like it hadn't been oiled in years. Marcus froze. His heart thumped so hard it felt like the whole jail could hear it. In the dim light, he saw 2 figures standing by the door. One of them was King Dre himself, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. Behind him was another inmate, shorter, with a scar across his cheek, known as Ghost. King Dre didn't step in. He just looked at Marcus and said in a calm voice, "Come with us." Marcus didn't move. Where are we going?" he asked, his voice trembling. King Dre smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "You ask too many questions, rookie. Move." Marcus knew he had no choice. If he said no, it could be the end of him right there. He followed them through the hallway, past sleeping inmates and dark cells, until they reached the laundry room. The smell of bleach stung his nose. The only light came from a flickering bulb that buzzed like an angry fly. There were 4 more inmates waiting inside. One of them held a towel in his hand, twisting it tight like a rope. King Dre turned to Marcus. "You saw what happened earlier, didn't you?" Marcus hesitated. "I didn't see anything." Ghost laughed. "That's a lie. You were right there by the bars." King Dre stepped closer. "See, we don't like snitches in here. People talk, things get messy, and I can't have messy." Marcus felt sweat running down his neck. "I'm not a snitch, man. I swear. I didn't say nothing to nobody." King Dre studied him for a long moment. Then, to Marcus's surprise, he nodded. "Good. Because I could use someone like you." Marcus blinked. "Me?" "Yeah," Dre said. "You keep your mouth shut and you move quiet. That's the kind of man I need on my side." The other inmates exchanged glances. Ghost looked confused. "Boss, we can't trust this kid." "Quiet," Dre snapped. Then he looked back at Marcus. "There's a D named Henson. He's been running his mouth to the warden about me. I need to know what he's planning. You get close to him. Hear what he's saying. Bring it back to me." Marcus felt his stomach twist. "You want me to spy on a guard?" King Dre smiled again. "You're smart, kid. You'll figure it out. Do this right and you'll be protected. Nobody touches you." He turned to leave but paused in the doorway. "Do it wrong," he said softly, "and you'll end up like that snitch you saw in the hallway." Then he was gone. The other inmates followed, leaving Marcus alone in the laundry room, shaking. He didn't know whether to feel lucky or doomed. He had just been pulled into Rikers' most dangerous game, caught between the gangs and the guards. The next morning, the jail looked normal again. Breakfast trays clattered, inmates joked, and guards yelled for order. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that every eye in the block was watching him. When he saw Officer Henson later that day, the man was standing by the phones, talking quietly with another guard. Henson looked different, more serious, more alert, like he already knew something was off. As Marcus walked past, Henson's eyes flicked to him. For a brief moment, their gazes met. Then Henson said, "You, come here." Marcus froze. The whole block went silent. Even the guards nearby turned their heads. He stepped forward slowly. And then Henson leaned in close and whispered, "I know who sent you." Marcus's stomach dropped. The noise of the cell block faded, and all he could hear was the pounding of his own heartbeat. Henson's eyes were sharp and steady. "You think I don't know what's going on in here?" he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You tell King Dre this. I'm not afraid of him." Marcus swallowed hard. I don't know what you're talking about, sir." Henson smirked. "Save it, kid. I've been doing this job for 15 years. I know when a new face gets pulled into Dre's mess." He stepped closer, his breath hot against Marcus's ear. "You've got 2 choices. Keep working for Dre and end up in a body bag, or work for me and walk out of here alive." Marcus didn't answer. His mind was spinning. How could Henson know already? Dre had told him only hours ago. "Think about it," Henson said, straightening up. Then he added quietly, "I've got eyes everywhere, too." He walked off, leaving Marcus standing by the phones, frozen. Inmates around him pretended not to notice, but Marcus could feel them listening, judging. He was now in the worst place anyone could be inside Rikers, stuck between the gangs and the guards. That night, he lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling, replaying every word. If Dre found out that Henson knew, he'd think Marcus had talked. But if Marcus didn't report back, Dre would come after him anyway. Either way, he was done for. He had to find a way out, a way to survive both sides. The next morning, Rico stopped by his cell. "You good, kid?" he asked, leaning against the bars. Marcus hesitated. Yeah, I guess. Rico shook his head. Don't guess in here, be sure. If Dre's talking to you, it's already bad news. Marcus lowered his voice. You ever worked for him? Rico's face darkened. Once. Never again. What happened? Marcus asked. Rico looked around, making sure no one was close. Let's just say Dre doesn't forgive me my mistakes. You either do what he wants, or you disappear. He started to walk away, then turned back and said quietly, Whatever you do, don't let him think you're scared. That evening, Dre's men came for Marcus again. This time, they didn't bother to whisper. King wants you, one of them said. Marcus followed them to the rec yard, where Dre sat on a bench surrounded by his lieutenants. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cracked concrete. You talked to Henson, Dre said calmly, not looking up. Marcus's blood ran cold. He talked to me first, he said quickly. I didn't tell him nothing. Dre finally looked up. His expression was unreadable. What did he say? Marcus hesitated. He said, he's not scared of you. A low murmur ran through the group. Ghost stepped forward, angry. He's lying. We should check him. Right now. Dre raised a hand, silencing him. You think I don't know fear when I see it? He said. The kid's shaking. Marcus tried to steady his voice. I'm not scared. I'm just trying to survive, same as everyone. Dre stared at him for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Good answer. But before Marcus could breathe again, Dre's tone shifted. If you're really with us, you'll prove it. Prove it how? Marcus asked cautiously. Dre leaned forward, his voice dropping low. There's a guy in C Block, named Spider. He's been feeding Henson information for months. I want him gone. Marcus froze. You mean? Dre nodded. Yeah. You handle it tonight, quietly. You do that and nobody ever questions where you stand again. The group watched Marcus silently, waiting for his answer. The sun dipped behind the wall, and shadows covered his face. Marcus knew if he said no, he wouldn't live to see morning. But if he said yes, he'd become the very thing he swore he'd never be. Dre leaned closer. So what's it gonna be, rookie? Marcus looked down, his throat dry. He opened his mouth to speak, and that's when the alarm suddenly blared through the yard. And red lights flashed, guards shouted, inmates ran in every direction, and Marcus saw it through the chaos. Spider being dragged out by two guards, blood on his shirt, screaming for help. Dre's eyes went wide with fury. Someone beat us to it, Ghost shouted. Dre turned slowly toward Marcus, his face twisting into a cold, deadly glare. You set this up, he said. Marcus backed away, heart pounding. No, I didn't. But Dre was already moving toward him. Marcus stumbled backward as King Dre lunged forward, rage flashing in his eyes. The other inmates in the yard backed away, sensing something dangerous was about to explode. I swear I didn't do nothing, Marcus shouted, his voice cracking. Liar, Dre roared, grabbing Marcus by the collar. Spider's dead, and the guards showed up before we made a move. Somebody talked, and it wasn't one of mine. Marcus tried to pull free. I didn't even know. Dre slammed him against the wall, his face inches away. You think I'm stupid? You're the only one who knew what we were planning. You think you can play both sides? Before Marcus could answer, guards burst into the yard. Back on the ground, one of them yelled. Sirens wailed, and the sound of boots thundered across the concrete. Dre's grip loosened just enough for Marcus to slip away. He dropped to the ground with the others as the guards fired warning shots into the air. Everybody down, hands behind your head. Marcus lay still, his chest heaving. The ground was hot and rough beneath his cheek. Dre was a few feet away, still glaring at him, his eyes filled with a promise. This wasn't over. That night, the jail was on total lockdown. No movement, no talking, no showers. The entire block buzzed with rumors. Some said Spider had been killed by another gang. Others whispered that it was a setup, maybe even by a guard. Marcus sat in his dark cell trying to piece it all together. If Dre thought he'd betrayed him, he was dead. But if the guards believed he was working for Dre, he'd never get out alive either. Hours later, footsteps echoed down the hallway. A flashlight beam flashed across the bars. "Marcus Johnson," a voice said. It was Officer Henson. "Get up, Warden wants to see you." Marcus's stomach tightened. The warden never called for inmates unless something serious had happened. He followed Henson quietly through the empty halls until they reached a small office. Inside sat Warden Davis, a heavy-set man with tired eyes. "Have a seat," he said. Marcus sat down slowly. The warden folded his hands. "We know what's been happening between you and King Dre. We also know about the threat against Officer Henson." Marcus froze. "I didn't—" Davis raised a hand. "Relax, son. We've been watching Dre for months. We needed someone on the inside, and it looks like you just gave us enough to bring him down." Marcus blinked. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," the warden continued, "you helped us more than you realize, and now we're moving Dre to solitary for the rest of his sentence. But that also means you can't stay here. You're a target now." Henson spoke up. "We're transferring you out first thing tomorrow. Somewhere safer." Marcus let out a shaky breath. "Safer than Rikers? That even exist?" Henson smirked. "You'll see." The next morning, before sunrise, Marcus was handcuffed and led out of the cell block. Inmates banged on their doors, shouting as he passed. Some cursed him, others called him a hero. But no one really knew the truth, and maybe that was a good thing. As they reached the transport van, Marcus looked back one last time at the gray walls of Rikers Island. He thought of Rico, of Ghost, of King Dre's cold eyes. He had entered Rikers as a scared kid who just wanted to survive. Now he was leaving as Samo, nay, who had seen how power truly worked behind bars. How the gangs ran the place, how fear ruled every corner, and how silence was the only shield. But as the van doors slammed shut and the engine roared to life, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over, because in a place like Rikers, nobody ever really leaves. Not completely. And somewhere deep inside the jail, in a dark, solitary cell, King Dre sat on his bunk, smiling to himself. "Rookie thinks he's free," he muttered. "He don't know nothing yet." The light flickered once, then went out.